He's certainly back with a vengeance. On the first anniversary of his second inauguration, Donald Trump using all the levers at his disposal, it seems, to enact retribution on his adversaries at home and the guardians of the old liberal order abroad. 1 year on, why did voters in the United States decide to overlook the attempt by his supporters to overturn by force the result of the 2020 elections and return to office the twice impeached Donald Trump? This time, well, it's different, very different. The 79-year-old president wields so much power, he can send masked federal agents into the streets and even raise doubts for some over the fair conduct of the midterm elections next November in opposition strongholds. Inside the Oval Office, boomers raised during the Cold War have been replaced by Gen Zers enthralled by the move fast and break things mantra of Silicon Valley tech titans. As Europeans scramble in the face of hostile tariffs, calls to grab Greenland, an official policy that states the U.S. must cultivate resistance within the continent to Europe's current trajectory, Europe's leaders face many of the same post-pandemic issues: an aging population, a head-swimmingly fast digital transformation, a loneliness epidemic among young and old alike, and of course, echo chambers that monetize shock and outrage. Today in the France 24 debate, how much can Trump test the limits of power? With us from New York, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, professor of history at New York University, author of Strong Men, Mussolini to the Present. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hello from New York.
Hello to Anne-Lorraine Bujon, editor-in-chief of Esprit magazine. This was your May issue, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, which is, what is it? Might without the law, I guess.
Might without right.
Without might without right. I don't know. Your advisor as well to the Americas program at the think tank IFRI. Damien Leloup, journalist at French newspaper of record Le Monde, and author in French of The Power of Geeks, which talks about some of the people who are very rich and gravitate in Donald Trump's orbit. Thank you for joining us. You can always listen to the show. That's right, listen and subscribe and like it wherever podcasts are streamed. Yeah, Donald Trump sure hitting the ground running back on day one, January the 20th, 2025, signing swashbuckling executive orders laid out in his Project 2025 platform. For Europe, it's really only 5 weeks later that it sunk in that, well, this time was different, when the president and his Veep, J.D. Vance, berated Ukraine's president in a live television double act that left allies at the time stunned. And Lorraine Boujon, that was the day it kind of sunk in?
Precisely. In any event, that's when we decided to put this issue out. On the way, the second Trump administration seemed determined to break all democratic norms, norms of decency, the rule of law. And that episode in the Oval Office we felt was really terrible because there was that attempt to humiliate an ally. Zelensky is the United States ally. It looked like a scene from a mafia movie. And really the way... The perfect example of the way Donald Trump expects his people to act like vassals, to pay tribute, to flatter him. You're never allowed to speak up to him. And this treatment, and also the fact that it was made for television, that it was really broadcast to humiliate Zelensky publicly, we felt that really the norm breaking had gone very, very far.
So making allies into vassals, humiliation, is this just one man's conceit? Are we in the realm of psychology, or is this actually part of a plan? Is this ideology?
To me, this is what's troubling, and about the most recent episodes, definitely, that you feel that, yes, we are dealing with a pathological personality, completely egotistical. Now, lost in his own realm of reality. So part of it is psychological, but you also feel that people have been working to enable this kind of behavior. And in that scene in the Oval Office, we just saw, of course, there was J.D. Vance. So he is one of the vice presidents, but I would say he is one of the Trump enablers today, and people who have been working very hard to try to build Donald Trump's erratic behavior into something like ideology or something like strategy. And he's now talking of a Donroe doctrine, but you still feel that the doctrine, I think, is very caught up with the whims of this completely egotistical president.
And so, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, people try to look to history for clues. In people's algorithms, if they're following this closely, you have, for instance, the William Butler Yeats poem from 1919, The Second Coming, where he says, "Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world." 1919, a period where after the carnage of World War I and populations traumatized, huge technological advances, including the advent of new forms of mass media. Are we in a 1919 moment with the advent of AI?
That might be a question better, excuse me, answered by your other panelist. But everything that Anne Lorraine said about the behavior and of Trump is correct. And the problem is you have these damaged people who get into, they create structures of governance, such as an inner sanctum filled with sycophants and loyalists. And this feeds their megalomania. And unfortunately, then they, if they get any pushback, they blame their own people, they take it out on their own people and also on the world. And so if we look at Greenland as an example, there are three elements to it. First is plundering, because as Donald Trump has sought to destroy the rule of law at home, he also has made it clear, he and his enablers, who are lawless people for the most part, that they care nothing about international law, that democratic internationalism must be destroyed. And so you have plundering, seizing Greenland because they want to plunder its minerals, and as climate change proceeds, they can discover oil. And the second is, I really believe that Donald Trump is in office in part to solve Putin's problems. He has surrounded himself with a lot of pro-Putin people, and NATO is one of the biggest problems for Putin. And so destroying NATO, creating a crisis of NATO is there. And then the third is, this sounds absurd, but he wrote to the head of state of Norway saying that he was, because he didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize, he didn't feel he had to care about peace anymore, which is a threat. This kind of mob boss talk. And when somebody feels unconstrained and has the psychology of these autocrats, Idi Amin was similar, Gaddafi, the more they feel they don't have to care about the Constitution, their party has become their vassal, the more dangerous they are, the more reckless they are. And so we're living through this episode of absurdity, which is all too real and all too dangerous regarding Greenland.
Okay, but it's not just about one man, Ruth Ben-Ghiat. So what is the anger, the I don't get my way, so there's going to be punishment and retribution? What's all this resentment about?
No, it's not just one man. And so this kind of inner sanctum where you end up with a cabinet full of people who are sycophants and loyalists. You also hollow out the institutions. For example, the Department of Justice is a classically authoritarian institution now. It just does the bidding of the personal whims, the personal grievances of Trump. It mobilizes to, go after his enemies. And in fact, in political science, and I use this concept in my book, Strongmen, there's a concept of personalist rule, where the leader is in office.
But in this case,
yes.
Ruth, it's the anger. Why the anger? What is that about? And the anger seems to resonate with a lot of his voters.
Yes. Well, all of these strongmen have a huge sense of grievance, that they're victims. And this was true of Mussolini and Hitler. And sometimes it's an ideology of victimhood on the whole nation, like Russia against the West or China against the West. But in Trump's case, so all of this, he feels that anybody who opposes him is creating problems that just shouldn't be there. And so he has a true grievance obsession. That's why he posts on social media all night with getting the Nobel Peace Prize. And I know this could seem absurd, but unfortunately, when someone who has this temperament and has constructed a governance structure so there's nobody around him to push back, no objective feedback, no input that business leaders know you need. Everybody knows you need objective input. Strong men take that away. And then that's why he told the New York Times recently that he's constrained only by his own mind, which is, of course, a very bad sign.
It's lonely at the top, Damien Leloup. We have a term-limited president here. He's criticized for not listening to people beyond his inner circle, and even that. This, of course, is on a different scale. How do you make sense of what's going on inside the West Wing and beyond?
I don't make much sense of it, but I do know that there is also a tendency to believe that thanks to social networks, you're connected to your people. You know what the average voter thinks or what he or she wants. And that's a very dangerous illusion, especially when your top lieutenants always tend to always agree with you. We see it with Donald Trump. We saw it with Elon Musk. Those people at the top are the ones who actually need the most honest feedback. And they believe they find this feedback in algorithmic bubbles, in the people they follow. And that's wrong. That's just not true.
And is that a mirror of broad society at large and constituents at large who, during COVID lockdown, were all by themselves and were connected to the world virtually, but didn't see human beings in person?
In a way, but I believe it has more to do with the fact that on any social network, the loudest voices, the strongest opinion, the most violent opinions tend to rise to the top. So that's a very dangerous matter to work with if you're a politician, and even more if you're an elected official or the president of the United States. We were joking in the newsroom the other day that there's a debate in France on whether we should ban smartphones for under 15 years old. Elected officials maybe should be the target of such a law as well, because it's very dangerous to enact your policies. And for instance, something which happened in the US, which is to send ICE to a city just because the president saw a couple of videos out of context on social media. That's an extremely dangerous way to run a country.
Yeah, cuts for foreign aid and the civil service have been the norm, and a massive increase in funding for immigration and customs enforcement, ICE, who've made public displays of rounding up alleged undocumented workers, sometimes with firepower, worthy of dangerous criminals. Here you see in St. Paul, Minnesota, on Sunday, they use a battering ram. In St. Paul, a retiree has complained that he was dragged out, and he's a U.S. citizen. He was dragged out of his home. We'll see how that story unfolds. The case of ICE is kind of like life imitating art. There's the movie that's up for Best Picture at the Oscars, One Battle After Another, where the sort of the field ahead of ICE looks awfully like the character played by Sean Penn.
Yeah, and it was filmed before Donald Trump returned to power, I understand. But it is really scary in a sense that you see these all these pictures that are movie-like but are suddenly in real life. And of course, this ICE, they look like a paramilitary force. Their cars are unmarked. I mean, they could very well be the personal security apparatus of any authoritarian leader, Putin, Maduro, pick one. They don't look like a law enforcement body of a democratic nation in 2026, and they don't behave like it either. And the comments that have been made on this recent killing on the part of officials are just sickening.
Yeah, this motorist who was killed, a mother of three, Renee Good.
But I mean, the way ICE has behaved from the first deployment, I think, and the first deployment of the National Guard in Los Angeles, when there was popular reaction against ICE and its methods, I think this is all very scary as an image of what happens when you descend into authoritarian rule.
Ruth Ben-Ghiat, this is nothing new. This didn't happen in a vacuum, is what I want to say, because there's been this sort of first militarization of law enforcement that's taken place in the United States over the past couple of decades. ICE just takes it to another level?
This is, yes, the police have been progressively militarized, but this is a completely different thing. This is an authoritarian framework where democratic-run cities and any city that puts up opposition to Trump is targeted for what in Minneapolis, the Twin Cities, is like people on the ground there. It's like a military occupation. And Anne-Lorraine is right that ISIS, it's a combination of like a paramilitary, of a junta, and these, because it's masked, these colectivos that Maduro was using in Venezuela. They're kind of, and the Philippines had equivalent. You have these like civilian gangs who are de facto allied with the regime, and they're masked and they beat up people. They're the enforcers on the street. And so this is completely new. As was in Los Angeles was the test case last June, where a battalion of Marines that had been deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan in the war on terror, between quotes, was deployed to Los Angeles, and that was a laboratory for seeing if the Marines could play together with the National Guard to suppress protesters. And Minneapolis is a test case for the expansion of this kind of militarized repression. And Kristi Noem, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, is talking about having air reinforcements. So I have called this for many months a domestic forever war, which is starting, and which is being played out now in the United States. And Trump has threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act. And Hegseth, they're just itching to treat Americans as enemy combatants. And a lot of my book is on military coups and Pinochet, and it seems like it could never happen in the States, and yet all of it is unfolding as we speak.
All right, and we see the people in those images there who are protesting, filming. We've seen there have been demonstrations, but we're French. We know about what a demonstration looks like. How come there haven't been millions in the streets in the United States?
In a lot of places in the world today, protest is decentralized, and there have been millions of people out in the streets in the No Kings protests. And there's two types of protests going on, and they're quite considerable. There's been a robust resistance. It just looks different. It's decentralized going on, where you have the organized protests, the No Kings, the hands off. You have boycotts going on. And then you have this very moving, actually, spontaneous mobilizations of people who see ICE coming to their neighborhoods. And there are these people who blow whistles. And the whistle will be one symbol of this, as the people in inflatable frog costumes and chicken costumes in Portland. And they rush out of their homes, sometimes in their pajamas, or they're on the way home from work, and they come and join people who are trying to protect those who ICE is harassing. And so there's been considerable mobilization from the grassroots level of Americans, and I predict this will continue to grow, because this is not what America is, and America is made up of many immigrants who came here to escape dictatorships and repression abroad. This is not who we are.
Damien Leloup, do you see protests growing, or again in this age where the performance, a lot of it is online, people just will, protest virtually by putting up a message or something, or a meme?
Yes, but the paradox is that for maybe 20 years, the tool of choice if you wanted to set up a demonstration was to go to Facebook and post a message there. Today, you can't be too sure that what you're posting on Facebook is not going to land you in jail. You're not too sure of the degree of cooperation that Facebook has with law enforcement and with this White House. You're not too sure you're not going to get a denunciation from your neighbors who see your posts. So it's a bit of a paradox, but it's become harder to organize online than it's probably been for 20 years. And in a way, the most effective tool you have is a whistle, and you have to go out of your house physically and use a whistle if you want to act. So you do see an increase in left-wing posts online of calls to resist ICE, but to be honest, a sizable chunk of that is actually posted by content farms who are just looking for likes and clicks and try to monetize this other anger from people who see what's happening in Minnesota and in other parts of the US.
Because that's the other aspect of this. Yeah. Both sides monetize everything. You have these YouTube streamers who show up in places like Portland and Minneapolis, and they're making money by filming everything.
For this White House, everything is content. If you send ICE to a city, it's also, in a way, the videos that are going to come out of this are part of the policy, because you're seen as being doing something against illegal immigrants, even if the people you end up arresting are not actually illegal. It's pretty hard to distinguish between what is content to be put on social media and what is actual policy and what this White House is doing.
All right. Writing in this May edition of Esprit, Anne-Laurent Bujon, you co-authored a piece where you spoke of freedom as something either safeguarded by law or freed from the law, like an unleashing of wild natural forces that solicit impulses as archaic as resentment and vengeance in a confrontation that will reshape a hierarchy. You point out several: men, women, whites, blacks, and powerful, weak.
Yes, this was part of what we tried to show in this issue, that Donald Trump and his administration and the people who enable this administration are glorifying strength, might, you could say raw power, but that's also power of the strong to crush the weak. And this has become the new rationale. So this goes from authorizing racist speech, for instance, or talking about human beings in a way that dehumanizes them completely, and it filters into normal, or at least normalized, public discourse. Putting children into cages.
But that's the extreme side. But it does work. The fact that when you run on an anti-woke platform, you get a lot of votes. People say, "Oh, it's gone too far."
Of course. I mean, there's always a way to try to tie into people's resentments and angers. And if you say that the status quo and the way the country was working before that was not satisfactory, you will always find people who agree with you. But here it's the fact that this administration casts the law, legal constraints, domestic law, the Constitution, international law, any kind of legal framework as simply a constraint, something that prevents you from acting. And it does not recognize anymore that you need these frameworks so that power can stop power, so that power does not become abuse. And so this is a way of, because you think you need action, you need unconstrained action, it can take you as far as saying that it's okay to be abusive, and that goes against, I think, the grain of a lot of American political history, and certain the spirit in which the institutions were built, which is that no matter who you are, if you are given too much power, you will abuse it, and you will use it against your fellow citizens. So that you needed to build a framework of rules and constraints and norms that would prevent people from abusing power. And that was really, I think, central to the founders' thinking. And this is what Donald Trump and his enablers, again, are trying to overturn, I think.
Through history, Ruth Ben-Ghiat, there have been nativist streaks or supremacist, in some instances, streaks going back to all the way, you could say, to the early 19th century U.S. President Andrew Jackson and his genocide of Native Americans. So this is a thread in American politics. Today, is it because of people disoriented over how fast the world is changing, a declining birth rate? How do you explain the fact that this streak suddenly has power?
There's two things to say. One is that I believe that the Jim Crow South was a form of regional authoritarianism in America. And we don't talk enough about this, and the Trump administration doesn't want us to be talking about it, and indeed has school curricular bans and things. So when Trump came into office in 2017, and even during his campaign the first time, he immediately made himself he made a big tent for all kinds of racists and all kinds of people with grievances, and he called them the forgotten. And so you had, neo-Nazis at Charlottesville in 2017. You had Southern racists who felt they didn't have anybody representing them. And it's very important. So we're 10 years into this, because when they were out of power, they used their time very, very well, messaging-wise, social media, and of course the big lie that Trump never admitted that he lost, and so people thought he was a kind of leader, the true leader in internal exile. And then we had January 6th. So they used their time out of power very much.
And that big lie worked because that big lie, as you put it, worked because now we don't watch the same news channels anymore?
A little bit that, but Donald Trump is one of the most effective propagandists in history. He truly is. And he may meander and ramble, but he always goes back. I've studied this extensively. He always goes back to the points and repeats. He knows that propaganda depends on repetition. And then now in our social media era, everybody, you have to have you make it new, because when you share, you put your own, touch onto it. And so he got this base of people, his hardcore base, and he's been very, very smart up to today about everything to do with messaging, and he imposed messaging discipline on the Republican Party. That's very important, that a Democratic Party, small d and big D, would simply not have. But one last point, when you look through history, the strongman people, they appeal when there's a perception of a lot of change having happened to society. It could be gender equity, it could be racial emancipation, it could be workers' rights. And that is when the strongman comes up and says, oh no, I'm turning the clock back. And that's what the Trump administration has done. Think about in the military, people of color and women at a high level of command have been reassigned or demoted. There's been a kind of society-wide governmental institution demotion and marginalization of people of women and all of the anti-DEI, diversity, equity, all of that. There's a war on blackness, a war on women. And so you have this white Christian male supremacist ethos, and somebody like Pete Hegseth definitely represents that. And so does Trump, of course, in his own person, his own conduct.
Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, now the Secretary of War, Trump's effective messaging seems to resonate well beyond U.S. borders. From Honduras to Chile, his allies have won a string of elections of late in the Americas. And here in the EU, the left already only governs in 3 out of 27 states. The far right is surging. I'm not even mentioning the UK, where Nigel Farage's Reform Party is on the rise. Damien Leloup, we look at this map asking for a friend. You know, there's a presidential election in 2027 in this country. You know, this effective messaging, is there a sense that it's unstoppable?
Well, I actually believe it doesn't work very well in France, for starters. It works very well in the UK, for cultural reasons, I guess. It works somewhat well in Germany, where Elon Musk and J.D. Vance have brought support to the AfD far-right party. But here in France, even the far-right parties, both of them, they don't want to be aligned with Donald Trump. It's not at all the same situation as in South and Central America. He's still a very more than divisive figure in French polls. You don't gain many votes by saying you support Trump's agenda. French people actually feel threatened, but by everything he's been saying about Greenland, Venezuela, every other independent countries that he's threatened. So,
how do you explain that Le Pen is distancing herself slightly from Trump?
But in a way, because if you're truly
we saw it with her statement on Maduro, and we saw it now with Greenland.
If you're actually running on a nationalistic platform, you don't want another country, be it the United States, to tell you what your foreign policy should be. You believe that you should be independent and that you're your own boss, and that your country should be able to decide for itself. So there's that. I think there's also a part of it that's more cultural, which is the far right in France does not have the same history as the far right in the US, and the Trump messaging simply doesn't work that well in France, which doesn't mean that it cannot be a problem during elections. For instance, we've seen in other European countries, far-right American donors signing huge checks, taking ads online, trying to boost candidates and far-right parties. So that can happen here as well.
And just one final question on this, because right now Davos is on, and one of the questions is how AI is affecting the economy. So far, studies have shown that AI has not yet destroyed a lot of jobs, but that could happen in 2026 and 2027. What would be the political impact again on the electoral cycles in France and elsewhere?
What we're seeing for now is very strong impact on a limited number of sectors. That's going to continue for the 2 years to come until the elections, that's for sure. But to me, the biggest question is whether or not there's a huge bubble about to pop that will send ripples going down through the European economy and the French economy. Because if there's a huge recession next year, obviously that will have a tremendous impact on the elections.
All right. If there's a huge recession, even though we saw all those billionaires lined up 1 year ago today behind Donald Trump at that inauguration ceremony, who stands to gain? Is it the left? Is it the right? Is it the far right?
Well, what we've seen recently is that when people suffer economically, they tend to turn to these populist leaders, although the word is not very satisfactory, but out of distrust and anger against liberal elites. So certainly the economy, the perception of the economy was one of the reasons that got Donald Trump re-elected. And I think in France, again, this would tend to favor the far right. But I agree with Damien that the far right, Le Pen, Le Rassemblement National, have a Trump problem in France because in a way they can't really align with this very threatening American giant. And there's been this tradition of anti-Americanism also in France. They can't very well look like they're the party of the enemy or that they ally with a foreign enemy, although it seems to trouble them less with Russia's Vladimir Putin. But on some issues, I do think this messaging is making its way into the French public debate, and the way the free speech issue is beginning to be discussed in a country where we had very different standards on free speech, and the fact that Charlie Kirk's assassination even made it into the French news at all. I think there is a way in which there's this transatlantic gigantic network of people and messages and media and social media, and they're building something like a far-right transnational alliance of nationalists, although I know it seems strange.
Yeah, and so certainly, and the world has become a smaller place, and the algorithms spill over one country to the next. When Trump addressed the crowd on Inauguration Day, he was followed by Elon Musk, whose fans say that he didn't give a Nazi salute. We can maybe roll the tape, and we'll see if that's dispelled or not. Damien Leloup, in your book, you talk about these Silicon Valley tech titans who a few years ago were supporting, looks like it to me, who a few years ago were supporting Barack Obama and now have turned to Donald Trump. So explain the whole Elon Musk thing for us.
How much time do I have? Well, Elon Musk is he's his own man. I guess there is part of it that's also in the realms of psychology. He has had a complicated life, and since 2018, he's gone on the shift to the right, which is very well documented. But I believe there has always been an authoritarian streak within Silicon Valley and within all those big bosses, because they don't like counterpowers either, especially Elon Musk. He doesn't like to have unions in his factories. He doesn't like to have people who can contradict him within his companies. He likes to be the undisputed boss.
Last week we were discussing on this show this scheme called Praxis, where they want to maybe have in Greenland a sort of I don't know if you call it a colony or a digital city, whatever they want to call it. But basically the idea is, can technology replace democracy? Is that kind of the idea?
Sort of. That's one of the things I wanted to explore in this book, is whether all those policies that are straight out from science fiction books, where do they come from, and how come sci-fi, for instance, has had such an influence on this US far right. And I believe the part of the reasons for that is that it's much simpler in a world where you can replace humans with all their complexities and their needs and all those pesky elections and all those discussions you need to have to make your policies reality. If you can just click a button and add a few lines of codes and tweak something and you're done. So I guess that's part of the reasons why so many of those tech bros and people from Silicon Valley feel some sort of sympathy for this regime that simply declares something and puts it into play without bothering to check with counterpowers or even Congress, for that matter.
And by the way, Damien Leloup does not like it if you don't read the book, because several times you call out, most notably Elon Musk, for not reading the books that you mentioned, these science fiction works.